Alrighty, so welcome to my presentation. This is a case study based on a fictional person. This is not a real name, obviously, for HIPAA reasons, but let's just dive into it on my assessment and the resources and theories I think that would be helpful. So for Sandra, the presenting problems as given in the case files is Sandra is currently living in a domestic violence situation. The case study describes how her boyfriend is regularly violent and gets very angry and hits her, pushes her down, hits her with a belt. She has bruises on her arms and legs and her face. Reading through more of the presenting problems, she shows she disclosed some history of family abuse from her father. There was also a lot of uncertainty in Sandra seeking help. That's one of the big problems of knowing that she's in a situation she doesn't want to be in, but doesn't know what to do, kind of knows what to do, but doesn't want to do anything about it, for fear of a lot of reasons, as we'll kind of get into in a little bit. But there's a couple examples of her calling for treatment and then hanging up before talking to anyone, that sort of thing. Long history, but also current of physical, verbal, and emotional abuse from mostly your partner, but also from family. One of the big quotes I wanted to pull for this was Sandra saying that she felt like a prisoner in her own home. So that's kind of the situation she's at. That's just a quick glance. What's going around Sandra, so, who's in her circle, what's going on, what's being presented, what kind of led Sandra to be here from kind of outside circles. Sandra was the result of a teenage pregnancy from her mom. Mom was pregnant at 17. She had an abusive father. Father and mom split, but father would abuse mom, would abuse Sandra. She also reported wanted to do anything to stop it from getting to her sister. So that part's a little unclear, but overall just a big thread of abuse and history of abuse. There was a report of a sexually abusive stepbrother molesting her. Family not the most believing and supportive in that endeavor, which really closed up Sandra, is what it sounds like. Good news is she had close friends that knew about domestic violence hotlines, knew about some shelters, knew about resources that were available, really being a lifeline in this whole situation of not the greatest support network and supportive figures, but had a friend that was able to help with that. But that's kind of the identified social circles for Sandra. Talks a little bit about work, but not a whole lot. These are the main figures and things that have led to this point. With Sandra, she's currently, as of this case file, staying at the Safe Haven Emergency Shelter. Reported a long history, about 3 years of substance use, but used for some years as a teenager, hasn't used in the last 3 years. Talks about an unsafe home environment. Obviously she lives with her boyfriend, so that feeling a prisoner in her own home thing. Boyfriend has come to her work, so work environment is kind of a tense situation, because if she leaves him and then goes to work, he might show up. Friend environment, a boyfriend knows about friends, know who she hangs out with, can kind of track her down when she's doing things. We talked about the supportive friend before, but it sounds like that's not totally a nailed down thing with the other friends. There's some ambiguity there. Sandra is in the lower class. She said she left home at 15, as we see down on the slide. She's a second generation immigrant, so not a lot of resources, not a lot of wealth, not a lot backing Sandra in terms of support and finances, healthcare, well-being, those sort of things. Things to know about Sandra is she really enjoys writing. That's one of the coping skills identified. She's pretty underweight, especially for her height. She's about 90 pounds, about 5'3" is what I remember. Reports being religious, but also feeling like she's lost her faith. But many people report like, wow, you have a lot of faith, you're a pretty religious person. A lot of negative self-image, negative self-regard, self-talk happening throughout Sandra's quotes and reports. Currently is working part-time, but is refusing further support and refusing further help to get further support. The big thing I think that would help here is crisis theory. Currently, she's experiencing support from crisis theory, living at a safe haven. But crisis theory comes down to that fight or flight, self-defense. The text defines, the crisis as being in temporary disorganization, as we've kind of talked about. There's been a long history of many of those temporarily being disorganized psychologically and having impact to normal functioning. The big thing with crisis theory is it's all about assessment, quick engagement, and prevention of further crisis. So the reference I quoted right there talks about the dynamic process where assessment engagement is going on at the same time. It's not like a long assessment and then a long engagement. They're engaging, assessing at every step of the way. It's big focus on concrete needs, so food, shelter, finances, how can we get through the day, and how can we move from unhealthy things like substance abuse to healthy coping to functioning and resolution. So, as we talked about, there's a lot of disruptions. There's a lot of building blocks that we can get on with basic needs, then to social needs, and then through crisis management, crisis theory, we can get into case management to help move towards further stability. So really building blocks of what can we do today that we can get into tomorrow, and tomorrow how can we look more towards the future, just one step at a time until it kind of tidal waves from there, snowballs into there. The other theory I think would be really helpful in using in helping Sandra would be cognitive theory. Big focus around, as you can see, the interactions of thoughts and feelings and behaviors, that kind of triage, how they all interplay with one another. The thing I referenced was CBT is the gold standard. There's a lot of articles that reference that exact phrasing of it's being the gold standard for X, for Y, for Z. A lot of people don't know this, but DBT and DBTPE are separate things, but most of the time they are categorized as part of CBT, so it kind of fits that cognitive theory. Great thing about cognitive theory is it can be super adapted to most issues. It's all about challenging the negative, about pushing resilience goals. This pairs super well with a lot of the other models and theories, even though they share as distinct. Many clinicians will use this CBT or cognitive theory and just pair in principles from other areas and kind of make it their own hybrid approach. So the way this works is we have strengths and weaknesses. So first we have crisis theory and then cognitive theory, strengths and weaknesses. Crisis theory, great for the short term. A lot of resources and things say 4 to 6 weeks. The text says that. That's kind of the baseline of how can we get stable before the end of the quarter. How can we do that? There's a lot more manual procedure following of let's identify certain needs and goals to get to some basic functioning. The problem with that is crisis theory is great at what it does. It's not so great at what it is not focused on, so it's not good for long-term care. While assessments can be great, they kind of need to happen quickly, and you don't get a lot of time to confirm, was that totally accurate? We don't get enough of that data to see, does things stick? Is that actually what it was, or was it something else wearing that hat? Micro focus, not macro focus. With the cognitive, again, kind of like we talked about, it's adaptable. You can make hybrid approaches kind of in the hands of the clinician. It's a jack of all trades. It's the gold standard. A lot of evidence. It's a very large evidence-based practice, researched. Kind of the downsides of that is it really does rely on the skill of practitioners and those that implement it. So whatever social worker is going to use it kind of comes down to how well do they know it, how much can they read into the specific case, what does it need. And with that, it's not a short-term thing, it tends to be a more mid to long-term thing, and there's the citation there. Other issues that we might do with Sandra is, I mean, we get a little blurb about what's going on with her, but it sounds like there's a potential for a lot of trauma recovery work, a lot of early child abuse, which could lead to a lot of attachment issues that could bleed all over the place into other issues. Physical danger by members of her inner circle. You know, if she's going to rebuild her life step at a time, is she going to move states? Is she going to move countries? Is she going to stay where she's at? Is she going to run to people that she knows and run into a boyfriend or her father, and they're going to break out? For her, it's knowing who can she trust, where is she going to rebuild. You know, there's just a lot of unknowns, and especially for her, trying to figure out what is she even going to do. Another issue is just past substance use. Reports say that she hasn't used in about 3 years. Not a whole lot of digging into that, but with substance use and any other diagnoses, those things tend to be a cocktail for anything can happen. If she starts using again, this could throw a wrench into all the crisis approaches that we're working on. Another big issue is a pretty severely low body weight, which would require some more assessment. Not sure what's going on with that, but she mentioned some self-image things regarding this that would need more exploring. Another thing I put in here is most of her life seems to be pretty unstable, leaving home at a young age, and a lot of abuse from people that she loves and trusts and doesn't love as much and maybe doesn't trust as much. So maybe this might be the first time she'll be stable in her life, and curious to see what's going to happen there. Do we get really attached to that dysfunction? Are we going to self-sabotage? There's a lot of things that could go on. Those are my references, so thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.